but there's something fun about podcasts. People are really enjoying the audio format of things, and it's sort of a whole new world
Hmm.
for people that have not paid attention to certain things. They're paying attention
Hmm.
in the audio world. That is
Hmm.
a whole new thing. So I am very excited about your new book coming out. It comes out in August.
Thank
Is that
you.
right?
Yes,
Yes.
August
Yeah.
16th. So like a
Celebrities
month
for
from now.
Jesus. How personas, platforms, and profits are hurting the church. That's a big, huge thing. Now, I've seen a little bit of ribbing online with you about endorsements
Oh, sure.
from celebrity Christians and endorsers. Let's
Hmm.
talk about that because I would imagine, like, what is it like to wrestle with the idea and really look at the idea of how celebrity can be problematic and also
Hmm.
try to use it in a healthy way as you are putting out a book. What is that
Hmm.
like for
Hmm.
you?
There is a weird tension, and I feel like it's better just to acknowledge it up
Yeah.
front, which is that if you have a message that you're trying to share with people in book format, part of the publishing game is that celebrity sells, so, endorsements, people having you on their podcast. Publishers are looking for a sense of platform. And so there is definitely a strong critique in the book of how people have misused their platforms. But I think for anybody with a platform, the key is to figure out, like, am I building this because I have a message to share from the platform that I
Yes.
think will edify the church and my listeners? Or is this more about building a platform so that I can get up there and feel good about myself and feed my ego and make a lot of money?
Yeah.
Like, obviously a lot of this comes down to motive. And I don't feel comfortable saying, well, if you're famous, you have bad motives.
Right.
Like, people are famous and well known for lots of good
Yeah.
reasons, right?
Right.
It's just a matter of, I think, for ourselves discerning, what am I in this for? And am I writing and speaking in order to try to edify and help other people, or am I in it for something
So
else?
you
So
yeah,
yes, there's definitely a tension there, and I expected that, like, from the beginning. I was like, yeah, this is just going to be part of the conversation.
yeah, and well, so you get to work through some of the things that you so you're living through some of the things that you sort of write about when it comes to putting work out into the world. Do you think it gives you a little bit more empathy for people that are trying to, like, balance that tension?
Yeah, the work of a communicator, if you either feel called to or are gifted to communicate, whether in writing or speaking, obviously that the work of communication implies an audience.
Yes.
You want people to engage your ideas, your work. And so just with that is the inherent tension of, how am I attracting an audience? Am I doing it in a way that has integrity? Um, how do I navigate having the spotlight on me? Do I let that go to my head? Do I surround myself in my daily life with people who know me far beyond the spotlight? Like, at the end of the day, from a spiritual perspective, where do I derive my value? So yeah, I feel those tensions as someone who is, a journalist critiquing the excesses of celebrity in the church, but also as someone who works in book
Yeah.
publishing and is in lots of conversations about the platform game, and then also a writer and communicator who feels like she has a message to share with other people. I feel like I'm kind of at the nexus in some ways of the conversation, and have to, as a journalist, I can claim a little bit of objectivity. Like, these are things I'm just observing. But then as soon as you put a book out and it has your name on it, you're also swimming in the
Yes.
waters of celebrity.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's complicated.
I think it's a good sign that you feel the tension. I think it's a sign of health that you notice it. I think if you didn't, it would be a sign of maybe not being fully aware of what
Hmm.
possibly could go wrong. So when you are looking
Hmm.
at endorsers and you're also thinking
Hmm.
about the problem of celebrity, how did you decide who to reach out to? Or yeah, maybe you worked with
Mm.
a publicist or somebody, an editor. Like, what made you? How did you come up with some names of people to reach out to?
Yeah, I mean, so we actually the list of endorsers was something that the Brazos Press marketing team and I kind of came up
Sure.
with. And I think there's probably a separate conversation to be had about what endorsements are for
Sure.
and do people even care? It's something that if you're inside the industry, you pay attention to, but I don't know if that many people care. But,
Yes.
it's part of what trade publishing entails is getting endorsements. But one thing that didn't come through in that tweet that I got pushback on is that we asked people who do not have any platform to read and engage the book,
Yeah.
as well as people who are more household names, kind of as a way to say that the opinions and perspectives of people who have no fame attached to their name are as valuable as people who have fame attached to their name. And in fact, I kind of trust people who don't have a kind of brand affiliated with their name to actually read the book
Yes.
and engage it, because and I don't think that anybody who endorsed my book who has name recognition, I think they all actually read the book.
Yes.
But sometimes what happens in book publishing, you realize that if someone is essentially a celebrity, well, they don't have time to read a book, but they still want their name to appear on it. So they'll have an assistant read it and like write something up. And then the celebrity person will like sign off on it.
Yeah.
Or sometimes like the marketing team will write like a generic endorsement and send it to the celebrity and say, so you might say something like this, right?
Yeah.
So
Like, I'm making it
I
easy
think
for
what's your
you. Yeah. Yeah.
right, right. And I just think for Christian book buyers and readers, it's important to understand some of these
I
practices
like
that are
that. Yeah.
common within Christian book publishing, just to be aware that not everything that is presented is always as it appears.
Yes.
And that's true in any book publishing business, but Christian publishers are taking their cues from mainstream publishers. And I think for industry insiders, we have to ask what is acceptable and what crosses an ethical line, or what does managing the celebrity equation with integrity look like.
Yeah. Oh,
So,
and here's what I appreciated about your endorsers. One of them was, like you said, one of them that was on the book itself that I looked at. It was just Joe Blow, a person. I'm just a person. And the names that I recognized were people that were not, they aren't recognizable just because they're famous, but because of work that they have
hmm
contributed, like Karen Swallow
hmm
Prior, and
hmm
others. It has to do with the work that they've done. And it hasn't,
right.
not just because they're famous for being famous. And I appreciate that. I think
Yes.
it does add some credibility because you do know some of that endorsement has to do with some people like me that say, "Oh, I trust that person."
hmm
I and some of the endorsements, if people are really busy, I look at the words more than some people do when it comes to endorsements. And some people, they're endorsing the person, they're endorsing their friend, and you can see that they're like,
mm
and I know Joe, and I know that anything he does is amazing. And so, that's
hmm
sort of how some of them are getting around that. But I just wanted
hmm
to say I did feel like the names there, it sends a message. They
mm
weren't necessarily the flashiest, and they didn't all land in the same place demographically either, which I think is a
hmm
really, really important conversation to have. So
hmm
you worked as a religion journalist for a long time. You've seen a lot of things, how good and
Yes.
bad.
Yes, I have. Uh-huh.
You have the files of things that are like, this may be problematic, but not yet. This is the yellow flag
Mm.
file. We just don't know for sure.
Mhm.
And then you've
Mhm.
seen things play out in a way that's really, really difficult. And that has obviously impacted, as I read your book, impacted your work. So, how, what has that been like for you as you have watched that? As somebody who considers
Mm.
yourself a person of faith, um,
Mhm.
and just processing all of that, like how has that impacted your faith, and
Mhm.
how you report on things, and who you uh, who you focus a spotlight on and who you don't? Talk to me about that a little
Mhm.
bit.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. And I think any any journalist, and maybe especially religion journalists who are Christians as well, would tell you that a casualty of the work is
Yeah.
cynicism, because most news that is reported and that journalists have to report on is bad news in some capacity. Like when things go well and when leaders act as if they should, we don't hear about it most of the time, because most news is like, this is how things went wrong. This is
Yes.
how somebody failed. So when I worked at Christianity Today, over the time that I was there, we received several tips about various leaders, household names, who were facing allegations, at that time, kind of off the record, about impropriety or moral failure or forms of abuse. And it was interesting. I never have felt like, because these beloved Christian leaders are apparently not who they present themselves to be, I'm losing my
Mhm.
faith. Um, and I don't know if that's because I never have really felt overly attached to like one specific celebrity figure, or I've never been in institutions that kind of revolved around that kind of leader or figure. So I'm able, even just from a theological perspective, to say, um, you know, the world is broken and fallen, and there are a lot of really unhealthy people in church leadership. And just because you're in church leadership does not mean that like you're perfect or you are above
Yeah.
reproach, or that God is uniquely blessing you or calling you. Like, I think having a really grounded theological view of the human capacity to sin and to self-deceive is important in
Yeah.
all of this. Um and just also, I think, being wise and wide-eyed, no, not wide-eyed, being wise and having your eyes open to the ways that power works within organizations
Mhm.
and institutions and among leaders in general. I think that's kind of a growth edge for a lot of Christians in the American
Yeah.
church, acknowledging and understanding the uses and abuses of power, especially power that's more social and relational, and how somebody can, with their charisma or the force of their personality, actually become coercive and abusive toward other people. Um, I wasn't really given a theology of power growing up, but that's something that I have felt like it was important to develop over the last several years, thinking about these cases of, individual celebrity Christians and the ways that they've fallen. It's not just a story about individuals, it's also about systems
Mhm.
and organizations that are built up around their persona and the people around them who allow them to abuse and
Yeah.
kind of look the other way and fail to offer accountability. So I hope that the book is at least offering a primer on kind of a basic theology of power and how it connects to celebrity. That was a really long answer to your
No, I
question.
love it. I love it.
But I am still a Christian. I definitely veer a little cynical, and I have to check
Yeah.
that. But I also have seen a lot and heard a lot, and maybe at the end of the day, maybe that cynicism, in like framed positively, is discernment
Yeah. Yeah.
and just being realistic and honest about the propensity for people to sin and then deceive themselves about that
Yeah.
sin.
Boz Tchividjian said, obviously he deals with cynicism, but he says in some ways it's good for his work, but that, it's he has other things that he looks at too that ground him
Mhm.
and show him
Mhm.
that goodness. You talking about like systemic issues reminds me, Chuck DeGroat said everybody like writing and working in the space is saying Dr. Diane Langberg's words, like just after she has been, and she's been talking for a long time about systemic narcissism And I'm really excited about the fact that there are more people having this conversation. But for some
Mhm.
reason, I think our Christian organizations are particularly susceptible to the idea that we are special, like our organizations and our
Mhm.
people. When somebody thinks and talks like they are anointed and chosen for a certain work, it
Mhm.
can lead to not holding people accountable or
Mhm.
thinking that we need to protect that at all costs, when that
Mhm.
protection then ends up not so much protecting the gospel. We try to say it is, right? But it really is
Right.
protecting an individual. Um,
Mhm.
and I think one thing that you said that stood out to me, and I think probably helps with fighting for healthy leaders and healthy people that are like sort of the more high profile people, is you talked about proximity. And I would
Mhm.
love to hear you explain a little bit about how proximity, when it
Mhm.
comes to, I mean, you mentioned in the first chapter, I think social power and proximity. How is proximity sort of an antidote to some of
Mhm.
those like fallen off the rails sort of problems?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I It's hard to define celebrity in some ways
Yes.
and distinguish it from fame, but the definition that really coalesced for me was social power without proximity. So having the ability to shape and influence many more people who feel like they know you than you could ever know, and using the tools of mass media to kind of disseminate ideas and views and your own image. But then without the attendant flesh and blood, behind closed doors, out of the spotlight relationships that keep that all of us need in order to stay grounded in the truth of who we are, both as people who are beloved by God and accepted fully and
Yes.
embraced fully, and also um have blind
Yeah.
spots and flaws and areas of growth, growth
Yes.
opportunities. And we can't ever none of us can become the people that God desires for us to be in terms of people of wholeheartedness and integrity without the kind of deep proximate relationship where the people in our lives love us, are sometimes able to say the hard thing out of love, and value us regardless of how we perform
Yes.
in the spotlight. And I think what can happen with a lot of celebrity figures, and this is, I think this is a temptation for anybody with a platform, is that relationships, it's easier to want the adoration of the fans
Yeah.
than the honest truth of the in-person deep relationships,
Yes.
So if I have had a difficult conversation with a close friend and she's been critical of me, or she's like called me out on something, and I don't like that because I have an ego like all of us, and I don't want to, I'm hurt or I'm angry or something. Well, how good does it feel to go to social media and see people engaging in a way that reminds me, like, oh, I'm funny,
Yeah.
I'm smart, whatever, like whatever projection of the self that I find palatable and needed at that time in order to protect my ego. um the other thing that can happen, of course, is that if you're in a position of leadership in an organization and you have a fragile ego and narcissistic tendencies, and we can talk about that, you tend to surround yourself with people who are only going to tell you the thing that you want to hear,
Yeah.
the things that you want to hear. People who adore you, who look up to you, who consider you a mentor or a spiritual hero, who are like you, who are like similar to you, who will affirm your vision for the organization. And so when we talk about accountability, and that's, when it's working well, I would think of accountability as another form of proximity. But a lot of what passes for accountability in organizations is essentially like a gathering of yes men.
Yeah.
And I think in a lot of senses it is mostly men,
Yeah.
although of course women can do it too. But um, it gives the appearance of accountability, but in fact, the charismatic leader has surrounded themselves with people who are never really going to stand up to them,
Yeah.
who are just going to reflect back what they want to hear and believe about themselves.
Yeah, so it there's gonna need to be some sort of intentional work of on the part of the person, the individual, to want
Mhm.
to be healthy and to, like, I mean, nobody wants someone to say something that's gonna hurt them, but they're gonna want to
Mhm.
they're gonna need to desire that healthy experience in being, faithful with their platform in a way that isn't self-serving more than they desire that comfort, and that's really hard. I
Mhm.
mean, it requires
Mhm.
not just a one-time, "Hey, guys, I want you to hold me accountable," and
Mhm.
then never check back again and say, "Oh, I actually really mean that."
Right, right.
And our relationship or whatever isn't dependent on you saying the the happy, positive things. That is a
Mhm.
hard thing.
Yeah, and I would think that for Christian organizations who are hiring and thinking about leadership, trying as best as you can to work with people and put people in positions of power who want to steward it well, who understand going in there are going to be temptations to
Yeah,
the kind of power that I am given that I have to honestly examine, and I'm not going to be able to see all of the temptations and dynamics. And so that's all the more why I need people who are going to speak the truth in love. And if you have leaders coming in who, it's almost like you shouldn't want to be famous in
yes.
order to be famous in a healthy
Yeah.
way. Like if you sense that someone really wants and craves the
Yeah,
spotlight and the attention and the ability to shape and influence from a stage, like maybe that's a sign that actually they're not ready for
yeah.
it.
It's like an addict. I feel like there should be some sort of clearinghouse, right? That goes through, Chuck DeGroat does analyses for people. He has a special tool that he uses. But I think it would be interesting to point out and say, oh, there's something there that you have an addictive tendency
Mhm.
that really
Mhm.
feeds off of a stage, and having
Mhm.
somebody like say, I don't know if this is going to be good for you. You may be amazing at it. In fact, you probably are
Mhm.
very gifted,
Mhm.
but it
Right.
is not good for your soul.
Yes. And not only is it not good for the individual's soul, but over time it's actually not good for the Christian organization or the church
Yeah.
or wherever it, like having a person who lacks health and groundedness and integrity in that way and who seems to have some kind of addiction to the spotlight is going to tarnish the organization,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
In some way.
Yeah.
And so many other people have pointed this out that we have been in a season in the American church of talking so much about calling and giftedness, especially around teaching and preaching and communication skills. But what if that I mean, I think it's just obviously not enough. It's obviously not the only requisite for stepping into a position of leadership. Like bringing that alongside the absolute prerequisite of spiritual maturity, self reflection, a desire to be in proximity with people who can say hard but true things. I go to a church currently where the pastor is not like a particularly shiny or gifted. I mean, he's fine.
Yeah.
But like that's not the main
Yeah.
event, and sometimes I'm really engaged and other times I'm not, but in some ways that's actually refreshing to me, like because I don't sense that he is trying to woo or wow or entertain
That
us.
makes sense. To say, I think it is more healthy to walk away from a church service or experience with somebody that is like preaching the word and not remember them particularly being amazing because that wasn't
Mhm.
the point of it anyways. So I kind of think, we have this idea
Mhm.
that saying, "Oh, it's fine," is sort of a slam, but it actually is really healthy. Yeah, he's there
Mhm.
to help you see Jesus,
Mhm.
help you see something in the word, or she's there to help you see that. And I am starting to feel like red flags when somebody talks to me about their faith community and they're like, "Oh my goodness, you have
Mm.
got to visit this place. My pastor is so funny. They're so
Oh.
amazing." And I was like, "No, thanks." No,
Mm.
I feel
Yeah,
like, I
mm.
mean, that's not,
And
it's okay if they're
yeah,
funny.
and
It's okay if they're a great communicator.
sure, sure.
Yeah.
Have you I mean, I feel like I have a s the same I have a similar spidey sense about that,
Yes.
but articulate, like, what do you think that red flag is for you?
Uh, I think it's experience that I've had too. Like, we had a pastor that was really funny, but I always felt a little uncomfortable. And we found out he was plagiarizing every word of his sermons. They were someone else's, and he was telling someone else's
So, it
personal
wasn't even his own
stories.
jokes.
No, it was Mark Driscoll's. He was preaching Mark
It
Driscoll's
wa
sermons and telling Mark Driscoll's personal stories as his own.
That is so weird.
Why not choose someone no one had heard of, right?
At the very least, choose an obscure person who no one could trace this back
Yeah, it
to.
was crazy. Bob Smietana actually wrote about this pastor uh, like a year or so ago because it was such a crazy thing because he lost his job because people found out that's what he was doing. He found out his way to a new church and he was doing the same thing.
Mm.
Even his mannerisms
Ugh.
were the same
Oh,
as
that's so
like there's like this screenshot that Bob shared in his article of Mark, a Mark screenshot next to this pastor, and they were doing the same thing. So I'm like, if it's sort of a pastor centered thing, I feel nervous
Mhm.
about it. I just,
Yes.
and having my husband work at a Christian organization with a high profile leader that people think
Mhm.
is funny and engaging and the thing, and then
Mhm.
knowing that it wasn't really what we had hoped it would be. I sort of have an allergy
Mhm.
to that now. And I have this sort of thing where I see certain way of talking about things like online from leaders. And I'm like,
Mhm.
"Oh, I have got a bad feeling. I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong.
Mhm.
I hope somebody
Mhm.
comes around them and helps them mature in their leadership." But, I just have that,
Mhm.
I don't know if you've experienced that as well.
Yeah, I think it's just again, being a cynical journalist, um,
Yeah.
and probably related to my Enneagram number since everything is, something about the feeling that someone is trying to wow me
Yeah.
and impress me, and it's not really about the content of what they're saying, but it's about their own image and personality that they're really trying to present as the thing
Yeah.
that will attract people. And then, of course, what happens is that they do attract people, like people flock to hear the person speak
Mhm.
or teach or whatever. And the church, the other leaders, the people responsible for keeping the organization going, start to think, well, like, we can't hold this person accountable. We can't give them a check on this because now their charisma and their personality is so central to our
Yeah,
growth,
it's paying the bills.
and we don't want to stop growing. We got to keep growing, like, obviously this is successful, obviously God is blessing this, so why would we put a stop to this kind of
Because it would
behavior
hurt
or
people. I mean, and you think about growth in that way, you think, some people just think about like the top level, really visible leaders of an organization, but there's a lot of other people that are just faithfully answering the phones and
Mhm.
putting together, VBS programs that if you hold the
Mm.
top leadership accountable, it ends up hurting their income too. And so
Mm.
it's hard. It really is hard.
Mhm.
Uh,
Mhm.
all the things are connected to be like, but I think it begs that question, like, are we trusting God to provide for our needs? Do we actually need
Mm.
to give a pass to unhealthy leaders so that people are provided for or people come to know the Lord. And I think I believe in a
Mm,
God that's bigger than that. I don't think he needs to say, hey, if I hold Mark Driscoll accountable, maybe people won't come to know me. You know,
hmm.
I just don't.
Yeah, I think what you're highlighting is when a specific celebrity figure is over time seen to be ordained or
Yeah.
anointed, and like their position is really wrapped up with God's
Yeah.
providence and God's plan. um it's like the ego of leaders projected onto God. like like all of us, it's good for all of us to remember God does not need
Yeah.
us in the spotlight with a platform in order to do God's work in the world.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't depend on us having people listening to us and looking at us in order to, you know, um, spread his kingdom far and wide. And there's also, um, it's not just we might, people might lose their jobs, or like we might start to lose members or whatever. The cost as well is the cost of the church's public
Yeah.
witness. Because, of course, with the story of Mars Hill, but also so many other churches, when abusive behavior was allowed to go on unchecked, and then all of the truth came out and people who were really hurt started speaking up, like, the church is made to look hypocritical.
Yeah.
And it's not just we lose more than
Yeah,
self-preservation
absolutely.
when
That's
we call
absolutely
people out.
right.
It's also like, people are reading about this in the Seattle newspaper. Well, what are our neighbors thinking about this church?
Yeah.
Or about the
Yeah. And I
church?
think it goes back to like that narcissistic tendency that infiltrates our systems is that we tend to see us especially anointed, our organization as being especially needed. And I think when we send
Mhm.
that message that says we can't say this because the reputation, if our church looks bad, it makes the gospel
Mhm.
look bad, it makes Jesus look bad, we need to be quiet about this. But we're sending a message. I don't think we think through the message we're sending to the people that have been hurt is that
Mm.
your pain
Mhm.
uh, has to happen, cannot be addressed for the
Mhm.
sake of the gospel. And that's a terrible message to send to people that are being, sometimes sexually abused, sometimes just spiritual abuse. Uh, you
Mhm.
know,
Yeah, I mean, isn't that just such a warning sign if people's pain or abuse is seen as just, the cost of doing the
oh
mission?
man.
Like like that is not pleasing to Jesus. I just want to say that on record. That is not okay. That is not blessed by God. That is not, like, if that is the mindset, you have really deep
Yeah,
problems,
you've
and
lost the
I would
plot at that
argue
point.
you've lost. Yes,
Something's
absolutely.
happened. You
Absolutely.
did mention. I think I noticed some things about your book that I think that are going to be hard for some people, but I think is really important. You have nuance, and a lot of people want to hear something is all good or all bad. And when it comes to
Mhm.
platform and being, well known, there is no
Mhm.
all good or all bad when it comes to that. Talk to me about that,
Mhm.
how you've worked through that.
Yes. Um, well, I'm very glad to hear that it comes across that way, because I've had a couple readers say, like, "Oh, wow, you really put this person on blast," or "People are going to be nervous about who you call out." And, the point of the book is not to call out specific people,
Yeah.
it's to diagnose and analyze. But yeah, when you're in the work of reporting on complicated people, as everybody is for this long, you just realize people are such mixed
Mhm.
bags. And that's not to say that there aren't specific actions and behaviors that are just uniformly wrong. Like, I have no problem saying that about specific behaviors or actions, but um you know the human heart, human desires, human motives are muddled.
Yeah.
they're muddled in me. And I think what came out in the Mars Hill podcast, one of the things that came out was actually there were a lot of people hurt in that system. Mark Driscoll should not be in church ministry. And also there are people who would say being part of this church saved my faith,
Yeah.
brought me to Christ, blessed my family. These are the deepest relationships I've ever had. It's so mixed, it's so complicated.
Yeah.
That's what makes journalism so interesting, is that you get to tease things out. Um and so I know that some people will want a takedown, and I do have critical words for specific people and organizations, but I hope the spirit is, if we're seeking the truth, it probably has to be more nuanced than all good or all bad.
Yeah. And you can say that about like, a bigger church has different susceptibilities that maybe a smaller church doesn't. But I do like how you kind of draw that line between, uh, Mark Driscoll was very unhealthy, seems to still be unhealthy, should not still be
Mhm.
pastoring, has not fully
Mhm.
reckoned with that. But also to
Mhm.
say, even with that, God God did some things for people. I'm not gonna give Mark the
Mhm.
credit for that. The church, some people, you know,
Yes.
despite the unhealthy things, God
Mhm.
allowed some things to grow there.
Right.
Some of my cynicism comes from my husband, working for Dave Ramsey's organization and leaving, and seeing like they have what they call personalities and they create them.
Mm.
Not that they
Mhm.
don't have any charisma or any ability themselves, but like that was a moment for me. I was like, what even is happening? Yeah, there was a time where I think Twitter did a big purge of like fake followers and maybe like 2018ish or something. And I remember going and looking like who recently has lost a lot of followers. Like, and it was like, I don't remember, it was sort of a big deal where people were like, oh my goodness, this person just lost,
Like
10,000 or
10,000
more. I think
followers.
that was a
Right.
really interesting thing. The fact that people are buying followers is really, it's really sad, especially in the world of Christian media. Like, we were supposed to be it just seems like completely opposite of what we should be all about.
Well, it's both the deceptive element of it, because of course nobody who has done this wants you to know that they've bought fake
Yeah.
followers. But then it also, again, just goes, it speaks to a desire to amplify the appearance of your own importance, because again, those numbers can get, there's a sense that they can open doors to other things. And again, I just think any like gatekeepers, the people who are determining like who do we ask to come and speak or who do we give book deals to, need to become a little bit wiser and
Yeah.
discerning about numbers can lie.
Mhm.
Like a number is just one bit of data that, for all we know, could be false data. Let's at least like look into it.
Yeah, and to talk about it, like if certain books are making a list like one time and nobody's heard of them, and that just
Mhm.
and they aren't hitting it for very long, and I think
Mhm.
the conversation at some point needs to be had, but it's hard to have because there's a lot of powerful people involved in these,
Mhm.
money involved, power, relationships, all those
Mhm.
things are really hard to have this
Mhm.
like the conversation about plagiarism and
Mhm.
ghostwriting and how that plays into Christian publishing. I am really interested in what kind of conversations are happening with that and will there be any changes coming forward. We've heard some serious allegations about high profile plagiarism that's happened and it
Mhm.
doesn't seem like there's much accountability, and I don't know if we're blaming legal or how that all works, but yeah, what are your thoughts on that sort
Mm.
of integrity issue when it comes to uh, communicating?
Mhm.
Christian communicators, especially.
So, do you want me to talk about ghostwriting or plagiarism or
I know
both?
it's both. I mean, they're not the same thing. Pick your poison.
So my view, which I tease out in the book because there is a chapter on Christian book publishing, is I think that ghostwriting can be a legitimate form of communication
Yes.
as long as, so I offer two kind of metrics for doing this with integrity. One is that the person is explicitly given credit where credit is due. Um, so I think we have to ask, like, a big mega pastor who says, well, I don't have time to write my own book. Okay, you need help, or you're just not a good writer. So you
Yeah.
hire a ghostwriter. Why not just give credit where credit is due and say, like, I had help with this? It doesn't necessarily mean that the book is invaluable, but there is this desire to hide the fact that you've had help
Yeah.
that I think is a problem. And then the other, metric is the ghostwriter being compensated to a degree that's commensurate with the value that they bring to the project. And so, it's not uncommon for celebrity pastors or writers to get very generous book contracts.
Yeah.
And then look at what the ghostwriter is getting. It's like, I'm pretty sure that they brought more than, 5% of what you got in an advance to this book. Like,
Yeah.
this book would not exist without them. So yeah, I think at the end of the day, though, with ghostwriting, the central thing is just be honest about it. Like, why are we trying to hide the fact that someone has paid a ghostwriter?
Yeah.
Yeah, plagiarism is obviously,
Yeah.
under no circumstances is acceptable. I think what has often happened is that when we think about some of these kind of high profile writers and pastors who have been accused of plagiarism, they actually are relying on like a team of people to write the book,
Yeah.
like a research team. And again, this is a form of deception because nobody knows who's reading your books that in fact you didn't sit down and write these ideas. You had like a team kind of come up with or at least compile your ideas. But you can imagine that if you have like 5 cooks in the kitchen, something's going to get dropped.
Right.
Whereas if you only, so that's not an excuse. It's just to say that I think the problem of plagiarism is connected to an over reliance on teams to write books. In terms of publishers, like, I mean, I don't know any publisher who wants to be accused of plagiarism. It's obviously a huge credibility issue. But I wonder if, in some ways, publishers are afraid to kind of speak up to the person and say, like, actually, this is a kind of intellectual theft, which is what plagiarism is, that is unacceptable and we can't work with you again. But like, oh man, do we really
Yeah.
can we really afford to not work with the famous writer because they actually bring in half of our sales? So I know again that sounds cynical, and I wonder in Christian publishing too if it's, a lot of leaders inside the industry take the approach of like, it probably wasn't intentional. It was a mistake. It was not someone sitting down and saying, I'm going to take someone else's words and thoughts and treat them as my own. And so there's this grace extended. But I do think, probably what's also at play is like, we can't afford not to publish them again. So we're going to let this slide.
Again, yeah, that message that's sent to the person whose words were stolen is, they're expendable.
Mm-hmm.
They aren't as important and valuable as the high profile
Mm-hmm.
person. It's so frustrating. I think one of
Mm-hmm.
the hard things too to see is in cases like this is that you just wonder, like, who is holding people accountable. Like, they're if they bring in too much money for a publishing house to be willing to hold them accountable, and we don't really see their other high profile friends, you know
Mm-hmm.
uh speaking up or anything. Like, that's a hard question too. Like, when you
Mm-hmm.
have a relationship with somebody and you're in the spotlight, you have a platform, and they have a platform. Like, what is your responsibility in
Mm-hmm.
how you interact with them and platform them? And I think that was something interesting that sort of came up with John Christ recently, right? Like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
the questions of, oh, he's back. And
Mhm.
is this good? And like what is the responsibility of people that are platforming him to
Mhm.
understand like that, just
Mhm.
last month, right? In June, when his Netflix thing came out and Annie F. Downs had posted something that was really interesting to watch play out. And I know you
Mhm.
saw that as well. And,
Mhm.
right as your book's getting ready to come out, and you had thought through some of the dynamics of what happened with him too as you're writing your book. Like, what is your thoughts on that? Like, just the whole process
Mm.
of relationships and like friendships in the
Mhm.
industry and responsibilities that we have to each other and to those that are listening to us and
Mm.
following us.
Mhm. Yeah, so
It's tricky. It's a hard question.
it is, and I'm trying to give it the nuance that it deserves. So, just taking the example of Annie and John, and I appreciated that she eventually took
Yeah, she
down
did.
the original post with him and posted a video where she apologized and kind of committed to learning and doing the work. Um, I have no problem with the idea that like Annie and John are
Yeah.
friends in like IRL. Like,
Yeah.
it's not like if you have been credibly accused of really bad behavior, you should never have friends anymore.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm fine with the idea that they are friends and that she cares about him and maybe does know him behind closed doors in a way that's healthy. I think once you put that in the public's eye with what read to me as like a kind of imprimatur, like I'm vouching for this
Yeah.
person as they're coming back into the
Yeah.
spotlight.
Support this person. Yeah.
Right. Like I think if you are really this person's friend, asking hard questions about, okay, but have you actually made things right with the women that you hurt? Have you offered a real apology? Have you done the work? Is it maybe too soon to come back like
Yeah.
into the spotlight? Like the original post read a little bit to me like we're not just friends, but like I'm opening a
Mm.
door for you with my social power to be welcomed and embraced and accepted, and hopefully the friendship would go deeper to say, actually, because I care about you and I care about your integrity and doing right by other people, um I'm not going to open this door for you until you have made things right with the women that you hurt,
Yeah.
until we know that. And that's where I think, Christians talk about like Matthew 18 and going behind, like to go to the person one on one. But when you have a platform
Hmm.
and you've offered public speech and public communication, I do think it's appropriate for readers to respond publicly. Like, if you have a problem with what Annie initially posted, you're not going to be able to go to her one on
Yeah.
one, so to speak. And there's something about being in the public square that, in my view, warrants and legitimizes a public response. Now,
Yeah.
there's healthy and unhealthy ways to respond publicly. Like, offering legitimate concerned critique is different from just like putting someone on blast and whatever,
Yeah.
like
Yeah. I appreciate that.
calling them trash or
Yeah. And there
something.
is a difference. Like everybody needs a friend. And I think you're right. Is that line that says between, this is a friend and you should support them like I support them, or I am promoting them to you, is it's really hard. I want
Mhm.
to wrap up this with asking you a question because sometimes we want to hold celebrities accountable or the people that have these platforms but there is a role to be played on the side of the person that's spending their money, buying the books, the
Mm.
consumer side. So I would love to
Mhm.
hear you talk as we wrap up. Like what are some things that we can do as people that are consumers? And I know that's sort of a cynical word for it, but like the audience, the
Mhm.
people that are part of the platform, what can we do to help promote and encourage like healthy
Mm.
personas, healthy Christian leaders, authors, speakers.
Hmm. Hmm. This goes back to something that we already talked about, but I think there is a way to appreciate and value someone's work without putting them on a pedestal in your mind or your heart.
Mm,
So, really keeping the focus on the value of their work and their contributions to the world over kind of a starry eyed adoration of somebody, you know, um, because that adoration can become a kind of unquestioning acceptance of everything the person says and does. And that can obviously, on like on a spiritual level, it might just be like idolatry,
yeah.
which is always going to be a problem, but it also can allow someone to get away with things that are really harmful or unhelpful. Like if they start to believe what their adoring fans tell them about themselves. So just kind of checking that in our hearts and imaginations and really focusing on the value of someone's work rather than a kind of attachment to them as a persona
Mhm.
or as a figure that we want to be like or we
Oh,
idolize in
that's
some
good.
way.
Yeah, see them as a real person and not just as somebody we consume. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's what I want to say.
So tell me what is amazing and awesome about the work you do? Writing books, writing
Mm,
articles, podcasting. What are you loving? What's energizing you lately?
mm. So I have this book coming out. Helped to host a podcast, but my day-to-day work is looking at book proposals, meeting with the team at Brazos Press, and working with authors to hopefully publish books that help edify the
Yeah.
church. And it's the most kind of non-public facing work of mine, but it's also the most rewarding just in terms of helping to create the kind of books that I would want to read on my own, even if I didn't have to. Like, these are the kinds of books that I really believe can help readers engage complex contemporary issues with depth of faith and nuance and intellectual heft. Um, so yeah, we have some really exciting books coming out. Of course, it's really exciting to also be a part of a team when you see a book really work and take
Yeah.
off. I helped to acquire Beth Allison Barr's book, The Making of Biblical
Yes.
Womanhood. It was like, oh, I guess we could maybe take a chance on this. And then, of course, it did very well and has been read widely. And it's just really fun when that happens. And like, you can't always predict
Yeah.
when it does,
I
but
love that
it's fun to
story
be part
too
of
because
that.
this was about her work. She did the
Mm,
work on this. It wasn't about being a famous person. It was about her
hmm.
being really spending a lot of time and research and creating a really
Right.
amazing, amazing book. So I didn't know you were a part of that personally. That is really awesome.
Yeah, yeah, we love Beth, and we have her contracted for 2 more books. So yeah, very excited to work with her.
Very cool. Well, I appreciate your time. How can we support you? Where can we find you?
You can read things that I have
Yes.
written at katelynbeaty.com. There is a link to various booksellers at the website for purchasing Celebrity for Jesus if you're interested in the book. I am on Twitter. I feel like I have to apologize in advance for being snarky at times, but that is you already know that I'm cynical, so that might come through. But yeah, katelynbeaty.com is the best place to find me.
Awesome. And what's your Enneagram number?
A 3 with a 4 wing.
Okay. Interesting.
So, the achievement performance thing feels personal to me.
Yes.
Like in this whole conversation, like, oh, I pick up on these dynamics because I am somewhat familiar with those temptations. But
That's awesome.
yeah.
Well, I appreciate your time so much, and I could not tell at all that you're jet lagged.
Oh,
You seem
good.
to be speaking quite clearly. So
Oh,
I'm
good.
excited
Good.
for you, excited for your book. I hope a lot of
Thanks,
people pick
Amy.
it up and Thank you for your
Thank
work.
you.
Thank you for talking
Well,
about the hard
likewise.
things. I appreciate it so much.
Yeah, thanks for your time
All
today.
right. Well, we'll talk to you later. All
Okay.
right. Bye-bye.
Bye.